We're going to start off by just briefly talking about what music does to the body emotionally, neurologically, physically, because it's a really good place to start when we're talking about music as the bridge.
So you want me to elaborate a little bit on the neuroscience of music and psychedelics in combination and its relationship to movement specifically. And there's this growing consensus in the neuroscience communities that study music and language that these networks for language and music are more the same than they are different. There's a trend for the last decades or so that anything you add neuro to, anything that you can explain from a neuroscientific perspective, certainly has more value.
And music's always been a part of every revolution, every social impact. I call it a mindful Trojan horse. It's like, how do we get people's interest in music? And then, surprise, you get like psychedelic education. And with music, it's more just like soul and connection. And there's not a lot of yelling at each other when you're just you're vibing to something that really brings you joy.
You can't have an argument when you're playing the drums or a saxophone. It's not going to happen.
Music has the opportunity to make somebody cry, to make them dance, to make them fall in love, to make them fight. It can rally the size crowd of a small city. So there's so much power in music.
But humans have been working with music for forever, right? As Mendel mentioned, it's like this ancient system that we have. And so personally, I think that human experience is just as valid as, the research side of things. I was working specifically in electronic music. Whilst this was all going on, I got really sick. I had a mystery illness. They thought I had Lyme disease, and it went on and on. And eventually my body just completely shut down to the point where I was having seizures and I couldn't walk. There was no like, oh, here's a pill and you're fixed. And this is where my understanding of the mind and the body really started to change. And it was always the drum for me that I found fascinating, because it didn't matter what type of tribe I was working with or person or whatever it was. There was always music and it always had a rhythm to it. You get everyone into trance dance states, and that's where this release comes from. So for me, it was always really interesting, because if you are looking at how sound and music all travels, the drum is something that remains quite consistent. Of course, if you're going to bang the drum, they're going to expect you to move.
I was asked him, like, if you had any suggestions for current researchers, what would you tell them to do? One of the first things was dance and roll around in grass. It's like the aspect of like movement in general is not only better for the nervous system, but it does allow one's body to align and centralize to new ideas. It shakes off that facade, right? And I imagine, like, when I do my little movement shaking, I'm shaking off this facade that my reality has put on me for the day. The dogs threw a ball at me.
I think that our society suppresses a lot of that for people. They go to work, they sit in their cubicle, they come home, there's not enough movement anyway.
So science is fantastic and very important for many reasons, but it is almost on purpose designed to not to get rid of human subjectivity. Like, I hope for a future where the therapy modalities at hand for care seekers are primarily integrative. The capacity to express movement, to your experience with the drumming circles, for example, sounds fascinating, where that is like an essential part of the transformative process that you need to immerse yourself in. And we treat every individual in this moment unique. And as therapists, as care providers, we dare to reinvent ourselves all the time. And that goes very much against the idea of protocolized therapies and treatments. Music is an incredibly powerful tool. I'm sure we go into this in more depth. But I can think of many cases where the best thing, the best gift for this care seeker is to have no music at all.
And I think that's why I like to look at music as a tool set rather than just like how I look at psychedelics as the thing, is that it's a tool set, because I believe music scales much like psychedelic scale, and music actually scales more and allows flexibility for other options. I grew up on Wu-Tang Clan, like RZA, Method Man, two like heroes of mine. The same thing to me happened to Wu-Tang. You had RZA, they watched old kung fu movies. They would go in, he had his friends and his cousins. RZA would produce a beat, they rapped over it, and then from that engendered a bridging of the skate scene. It engendered what we have now as street fashion. It engendered a lot of new movies. So that's one reason why I just love music so much, and I think it has so much overlap. Music's so flexible, and that's why I love it because it meets people where they're at. So it's like, what is the outcome? There's a large portion of people who just take mushrooms and put their playlists on shuffle. Like I've had two different experiences to Jimi Hendrix. The first time I listened to Jimi Hendrix on LSD, it was completely like profound, blew my mind. The second time I had it, the same playlist, I actually felt like I was experiencing Jimi Hendrix's overdose, like I was a heroin addict. Music's just flexible. It's just like water, and it just fits in when used right, and you built the infrastructure of what you're trying to do with it.
I get more and more annoyed by genre labels. And at the same time, I also see the value of it. It's almost similar as my annoyance with psychiatry and the labeling of mental disorders is it's so rigid and it's so stupid in many ways. And at the same time, okay, I can see the value of it because it allows us to speak about certain phenomena and create a shared reality. Any genre can be healing depending on the person, depending on the moment, like whether we talk about rap or punk or heavy metal or neoclassical or ambient or contemporary avant-garde or Indian classical music, like all of that really has its place in healing. I think in our Western world, we don't have that anymore. Of course, we have church music and all of that, but we are trying to reinvent ourselves here when it comes to music for psychedelic therapy, because it really touches upon both. We talk about healing, transcendental experiences. And in that, we talk about, this is another separation I sometimes use here, is we can think of music as either being identity or ego affirming or ego/identity dissolving. Music that really draws you in and weaves a tapestry, weaves like this imaginary realm that is you, in essence. Right? I think there's a real value for contemporary artists that are daring to really go beyond definitions of genre and, in that sense, create a music, or at least aspire to a form of music that is transcultural. Structure in music, so I sometimes refer to this as the anchoring in time that music enables, which rhythm does, but it also beyond rhythm, like any pulse in the music, any recurring pattern, to your point, can do that. Bringing in that structure through music can be essential at times because it enables that sense of continuity to be experienced and not being totally dissolved. At the same time, it's creating confusion in the brain. It actually dissolves that structure. So it encourages these transcendental experiences more strongly.
A lot of my work is centered around rhythm and how rhythm and polyrhythms, all these different things, have this impact because I created a methodology that is based around the understanding of those more indigenous ceremonies where the rhythm builds. We speed the tempo up. And so that's why I'm fascinated personally by electronic music, because there's so many different genres and subgenres that allow you to go through that journey all under one umbrella.
A lot of our events that we do are meant to be more inward facing journeys. And so we've had East Forest and Snowraven and even artists like Trevor Hall and the Lumineers and stuff at these events sometimes need a break and they need to go and it just can be too much and they have to go and lie down and come back down a little bit in that setting.
So it creates, and it's not even purposely, right? Like it's actually the opposite. We want as many people as possible because it was dealt in the 60s and they tie that to like a hippie movement was like black, which is still, or white, which is still crazy because we have so many great black artists and groups through the psychedelic space.
I'm from North London and there's so many genres that have come out of London, and I'm going to highlight grime as one of those genres where that's what I grew up on, right? I've played grime when I've been in a mushroom trip, for example, and had the best time ever. But a lot of the music that we play falls under things like garage, house, drum and bass, and he is a death metal head, whereas when he was listening to genres that he hadn't listened to before that had like kind of that pattern to it and that tempo to it, he was able to get himself out of that mood space. Notable rise in psilocybin mushrooms in dance music spaces. People are drinking less.
But I think in some of these bigger places where especially psilocybin use is so much on the rise, I think people are microdosing and having experiences that it gives them an alternative to drinking if they might not have been big fans, or as you get older in life and hangovers get worse and worse, you have alternatives to go out and still be in a different headspace a little bit, but not have to be dealing with everything that comes from alcohol.
Action was driven by influence. So there's an aspect of there's probably a lot less high school kids being influenced to drink and more influenced to do mushrooms earlier, which means that's their go-to when they go out compared to drinking. So maybe you don't want to spend $40 on 2 cocktails. They'd rather spend $10 on a whole more profound, fun experience for themselves. So they decide to take mushrooms instead too.
Yeah.
And I had this friend of mine saying, Mendel, you really need to understand alcohol. You need to understand what it is. Otherwise, you don't understand the culture. For me, personally, there is something really poetic, and I would even say sometimes even psychedelic about alcohol. The dark side of alcohol is that it does that. If you use alcohol as an emotion regulation technique, it's great on the short term, but it's an absolutely terrible idea for the long term.
I'm way more biased to the fun aspect of psychedelics and the healing parts.
I would say, just in general, the portal, that the top line mission of what we're doing is to destigmatize the responsible use of psychedelics.
I've just written a book called Music is Medicine. It's about rhythm and everything that I've spoken about here, and my personal story and the contributions that I have seen with my work. So making the science and the research way more layman, way more commercial, and removing any kind of barriers that people might find just by breaking this kind of conversation down so that people can really understand it.